how do you see this pact on disengagement with China that we have? Do you see it as a tactical thaw in ties, or do you see it as the beginnings of a possible strategic reset? Because our border issues remain unresolved, right? I mean, it's clearly not defined on either side. So are we beginning to see a strategic reset?
I see disengagement as disengagement. Nothing more, nothing less. If you look at our current situation with China, we have an issue where our troops are uncomfortably close along the line of actual control, which required us to disengage. And this last understanding of October 21 is the last one of the disengagement agreements, so that, with its implementation, the disengagement part of the problem is addressed. After this, there is the de-escalation, which means, the massing of troops along the LAC and all the associated developments with that. And linked with that, the other aspects of the relationship. So at this moment, frankly, we are focused on the disengagement. Where will the disengagement lead us? It could lead to, it's a reasonable supposition that there will be some improvement in the ties. But some of the words you used right now, I think, are sort
optimistic.
Perhaps the current situation doesn't necessarily warrant that at this time.
One of the things that we've noticed is over the last year or so, ever since the economic survey came out and it spoke about the need to relax investment restrictions that had been placed on China once the relations between the two really went downhill. The perception we have from the outside is that there seems to be a little bit of tussle between the economic and security arms of your government. The economic arm would want closer and deeper relations with China, and you would insist that it needs to be driven from a security perspective. Is that an accurate way of looking at it?
I think an accurate way of looking at it is that in every government, different ministries have different responsibilities, and flowing from that responsibility, they have a point of view. So you referred to an economic survey. In effect, there would be a national security survey, which you may not see in public, which would have a national security point of view. What the Ministry of External Affairs does is, in a way, it's an integrator of all points of views and takes a overall balanced approach. So if somebody has a point of view, we look at that point of view. We don't say you can't have that point of view, but a point of view at the end of the day is not a policy decision.
Very simply put, and I know it's very difficult to narrow down in terms of definitions. I think one reason why a lot of people struggle, even in terms of how they analyze the situation, is how does India view China? At one point in time, of course, there was this perspective of these two Asian brothers and how the century would belong to them. But how do you view it? Is it an adversary? Is it a competitor in certain perspectives? What is it?
I'm tempted to say, read my book. You'd get in each book a chapter on China, which would give you some sense. But I'll give you a short, condensed form of the answer. Look, you have two countries, quite unique, partly by the size of the population, partly by the civilizational characteristics of the state, uh, by the length of their history, by their you know, by their previous contributions and standing in the world, which went through a certain downturn in their respective histories. And today, these two countries are on the upswing again. Now, it so happens that they're located next to each other, which makes the management of a, you know, if there is a changing situation, a change is difficult to handle at best of times. Two changes are that much more complex. Two changes next to each other are even more complex. So how do you get a sort of a equilibrium or a stability when two big countries are changing so profoundly next to each other? I think is a conundrum which has been very rarely faced in human history. It is not easy. I mean, while we are next to each other, it's also quite obvious that in many ways the societies are also very different from each other. You know, our politics is very different, our economics is very different. What we regard as merits and virtues need not always be the same. In a way, I would say the mindsets are also different of these two states. So you have to factor all this in making an approach. And that is why it's such a complicated relationship.